Hi, Bookstriper here. I would like to quickly make an argument for why Hutch is just a little bit wrong in how he thinks about elections and voting in the two-party system. So I agree with Hutch in 99% of his criticism of leftists, so this is coming from a place of good faith. I just want the arguments for why voting for Democrats is right to be as strong as they can be. So let me make my point succinctly up front here. I agree with what Hutch says in the second tweet here, where he says that Democrats are infinitely better than the Republicans. But I think it's a mistake for him to also say he would vote for 99% Hitler over Hitler. Not only is it a mistake to say that, it would in fact be a mistake to do that. We engage in these extreme hypotheticals to test our arguments and logic, and in this case, I actually think Hutch has concluded incorrectly in the hypothetical, and that is what I want to correct here. My overall point is that third-party voters would actually be right if the choice was Hitler versus 99% Hitler. But first, let me say again, Democrats are not 99% similar to the Republican Party. It's nowhere close, so that's not the point of this video. My point is in fact the opposite. The Democrats are vastly preferable to the Republican Party. The Democrats will actually do good things, not just fewer bad things, which is what the 99% Hitler hypothetical represents. And that has to be the argument for why people should vote for Democrats. Harm reduction is also good, but on its own, it's not enough, and it shouldn't be enough. If the choices were between Hitler and 99% Hitler, third-party voters would be right not voting for 99% Hitler because elections aren't really like the trolley problem. Why isn't it like the trolley problem? Because the point of the trolley problem is that you truly, by the definition of the hypothetical, have only two choices. You either pull the lever to save 5 lives but kill 1 person, or you let the train run over the 5 so the 1 person doesn't die. And yes, if the choice was to pull the lever to put 99% Hitler in power, or don't pull the lever and let 100% Hitler come into power, you should pull the lever. But that's not really the choice you're faced with when asked whether you would vote for 99% Hitler over Hitler. The two parties who have any chance of winning are not truly the only options where you can put your energy and vote during an election, even in a two-party system. Before I explain further, I would like to make the Hitler versus 99% Hitler more concrete. Let's say Hitler is campaigning on killing 10 million people, while 99% Hitler is campaigning on killing 9.9 million people, for example. First of all, are you going to tell people in your life, and if you have a platform like a stream, use your stream to tell people how important it is that 99% Hitler wins the election so those 100,000 people can be saved? Is that where you're going to put your energy if this was the political situation your country was in? No. At that point, the third-party voters who put their energy into a political movement opposing both realistic options would be right to put their energy elsewhere, and also their votes. You should not be endlessly loyal to your political system. If the system has given you the options of Hitler versus 99% Hitler, isn't it actually time to start taking to the streets, protesting, civil disobedience, even violent protests insofar as that can be effective? Actually firebombing a Walmart, so to speak? At least that is an option that I think should not be mocked if you were actually faced with that insane choice of Hitler versus 99% Hitler. Luckily, that's not anywhere close to the case that actually faces the voters in US elections, and so again, that fact is what needs to be pointed out. The third-party voters would be right if the choice was Hitler versus 99% Hitler, but that's not the choice, and that's why third-party voters are wrong. Now let's get back to the trolley problem and why I think it's a bad analogy. First of all, instead of talking about the trolley problem all the time, Hutch should just say he's a consequentialist, and he measures the consequences of different actions to decide what is best. That more accurately describes what he actually means when he talks about the trolley problem anyway. More precisely, he seems to be a utilitarian, where he wants to maximize well-being while reducing suffering. But the word consequentialism is better because it puts the word consequence right in there. Now, the trolley problem is a bad analogy because you're not actually making an executive choice about who is going to win. You are making a choice about which political team to join. So the question is really, are you going to join Team 99% Hitler? If I wanted to translate this back into a refined version of the trolley problem, it would be like this. There's a lever, but it can be pulled in several different directions. For simplicity, let's just imagine a third direction: left, right, and backwards. As you step up to the lever, you see millions of people pulling it toward the track with 10 million people lying on it who will be killed. You also see millions of people pulling it toward the track where 9.9 million people will be killed. But you also see a few thousand people pulling toward a track that will take the train into a tunnel, but you can't see what's in there. Now, those people are vastly outnumbered by the two other teams, but if this was the trolley problem you were faced with, which team would you join? This trolley problem is better, but it still doesn't quite capture what it means to join a political movement. Overall, the point is that surely there must exist some breaking point where you no longer support either of the two realistic options, and instead devote your energy to trying to grow a political movement you actually feel good about. Third-party voters are at that point now, which I think is dumb, but to dismiss that whole logic entirely and say that there exists no such breaking point for you, which is what I see voting for 99% Hitler as, is also dumb. You must be able to say that you can imagine, hypothetically, a scenario where you wouldn't vote for either option, otherwise you lose credibility when you say that the Democrats are actually good.